The survey ship Kindred Dawn had been traveling through empty space for 6 weeks when Officer Takeshi Mori noticed something impossible on his display. A ship, not a derelict tumbling through the void, not debris scattered across 1,000 kilometers. A ship, intact, running lights active, positioned in stable orbit around absolutely nothing. Mori checked his instruments 3 times. The vessel was 1.8 kilometers long, a generation ship from Earth's second colonial wave, 70 years old. Registry identified it as the Persephone. Last contact logged 52 years ago, presumed lost with all 12,000 colonists aboard. But here it was, life support active, hull integrity perfect, thermal signature indicating comfortable habitation temperature, no distress beacon, no communication, no movement. Mori sent the report to his captain, then initiated docking protocols. Something cold had settled into his chest. The Persephone looked like a ship where people still lived, but his sensors showed no biological signatures, no electromagnetic noise from personal devices, no trace of the small, constant chaos that accompanied human habitation. Just silence. The airlock cycled smoothly. Atmosphere composition, normal. Temperature 21 degrees Celsius. Lighting soft, warm, designed for human comfort. Mori stepped inside, and his breath caught. Every surface was covered in drawings, not graffiti, not vandalism. Careful, deliberate artwork, executed in what looked like colored nutrient paste from the ship's food printers. Children's drawings, rendered with the particular earnestness of young artists trying to communicate something important. Stick figures holding hands in long lines. Gray rivers flowing through starfields. Rooms filled with waiting people. And everywhere, repeated in hundreds of variations, the same phrase in a child's handwriting. The gray people say it's okay. The gray people are helping us go outside. Mori walked deeper into the ship. Crew quarters, beds made, personal effects arranged neatly. Galley, food in stasis, fresh, perfectly preserved. Engineering, systems running smoothly, automated maintenance protocols functioning exactly as designed. 12,000 people had simply vanished. Mori reached the main observation deck and stopped. The entire forward viewport was covered in a massive mural. Hundreds of children must have worked on it together. It showed a river of gray flowing through black space, and in the river small figures walking towards something the children had drawn as a bright circle surrounded by other circles. At the bottom, in an adult's handwriting, someone had written, "We don't understand what they see, but they're not afraid. We're choosing to trust them. Forgive us if we're wrong. Captain Voss." Mori stood in the empty ship, surrounded by evidence of an orderly departure, and felt something he couldn't name crawl up his spine. This wasn't an evacuation. This was something else entirely. Dr. Kivas Tenora arrived on the Persephone 4 days later with a team of 30 specialists and a mandate from Earth's Colonial Affairs Bureau. Determine what happened, determine if it could happen again, determine if 12,000 citizens were dead, or something stranger. She had spent 20 years investigating colonial failures, equipment malfunctions, environmental miscalculations, social collapses. She had seen what disaster looked like. This wasn't disaster. Tenora stood in the ship's archive room, reviewing the final week of logs. Captain Voss had been meticulous. Every entry time-stamped, every observation recorded with the precision of someone who knew they were documenting something unprecedented. Day 18-444 of a voyage. Navigation error identified. We've drifted into a region not marked on our charts. Attempting to recalibrate and return to planned trajectory. Minor issue. Several crew members reporting unusual fatigue and temporal disorientation. Medical is monitoring. Day 18-444. Recalibration failing. Every course correction seems to increase our deviation rather than fix it. Engineering reports all systems nominal. Something is wrong with space itself here. Crew reporting increased symptoms, headaches, perception of weight or pressure, difficulty maintaining attention. Children appear unaffected. Day 18-4550. We're stuck. Every attempt to leave this region fails. It's as if space is thicker here. Denser. Dr. Amadi describes it as trying to swim through honey. Most adults are now experiencing severe symptoms. We're keeping them in medical stasis when possible. The children, however, are increasingly excited. They say they can see gray people outside the ship, beckoning. Day 18-1453. Biometric readings are concerning. Adult neural activity is slowing. Not degrading, slowing. As if our brains are attempting to process information through some kind of resistance. Children's neural activity is accelerating in compensation, as if their minds are adapting to something ours cannot. Day 18-1456. The children have drawn what they see on every available surface. They say the gray people are time people who live in the slow river, and that the river leads somewhere safe. They say we can walk through it if we trust them. Dr. Ahmadi's team has no explanation, but our adults are dying slowly, hour by hour, under the weight of whatever this place is. Day 18:45-8. We've made a decision. The children see a path. The adults see only death. We're going to trust our children. If we're wrong, we're choosing death actively rather than passively. If we're right, we're choosing survival on terms we don't understand. Captain Voss, signing final log. The recording ended. Tenora sat in silence, processing. Then she pulled up the biometric data from the final entries. The adults hadn't been dying of exposure or starvation. Their cellular decay was temporal. Their bodies were experiencing normal aging, but their neural perception of time had begun running at a different rate than physical reality. Their consciousness was desynchronizing from their own biology, and the children, neurologically more plastic, more adaptable, had compensated. Tenora looked at the drawings covering the walls. What had the children seen that the adults couldn't? The coalition fleet arrived with ceremony and suspicion. 7 species had lost contact with human vessels in this sector over the past 50 years. No wreckage, no distress calls, just silence. Some coalition members had begun suggesting darker explanations. Human expansionism, secret military experiments, even intentional colonist culling. The discovery of the Persephone intact, empty, covered in children's art, had done nothing to ease those suspicions. Emissary Zorl of the Quentari Confluence stood on the bridge of his diplomatic vessel and studied the human generation ship through external cameras. His species had evolved in high-gravity environments with rapid temporal perception. To Quentari consciousness, waiting was physiologically painful. Patience was a concept they understood intellectually, but could not experience without pharmaceutical intervention. Humans, by contrast, seemed to build their entire civilization around waiting, multi-generational projects, century-long voyages, cultural traditions preserved across millennia. Zorl had always found it slightly disturbing. Now, looking at the silent ship, he wondered if that strange human relationship with time had led them somewhere the rest of the galaxy could not follow. Dr. Tenora's voice came through the communication channel. Emissary Zorl, thank you for coming. We're still processing evidence, but I want to share our preliminary findings before speculation becomes rumor. Zorl's translator rendered her tone as cautiously formal, a human social signal indicating something uncomfortable was about to be discussed. Please proceed, Dr. Tenora. Tenora transmitted a data packet. Zorl's analytical staff processed it in real time, their quiet alarm filtering through his perception as biometric shifts. We believe the Persephone encountered a spatial phenomenon we're calling a slow layer, Tenora continued. A region where the dimensional structure of space-time exists in a folded state. Our initial analysis suggests consciousness experiences this fold as extreme temporal dilation. Most organic neural architectures would interpret entry as instant heat death of the universe, a perception so overwhelming that cellular function would cease trying to continue. Zorl felt his breathing accelerate. And humans? Human neural architecture seems to process it differently. We experience it as survivable time. Slow, heavy, difficult, but survivable. Our biometric data suggests human adults found it agonizing but endurable. Human children adapted to it naturally. You're saying humans can survive where others cannot. We're saying humans can perceive where others cannot. Tenora corrected. There's a difference. We don't know yet if perception equals survival. Zorl was quiet for a moment. Then, Doctor, 14 human ships have gone silent in this region. No other species has lost vessels here because no other species colonized here. We marked these regions as sterile, not dangerous, simply empty, void. We avoided them unconsciously, the way one avoids staring at blank walls. You're saying other species can't even perceive these regions as navigable. I'm saying we don't perceive them at all. When I look at the space surrounding your ship, my instruments show empty vacuum. But my crew reports discomfort, disorientation. We can't focus on it. It's like trying to see something in your peripheral vision that vanishes when you look directly. Tenora was silent for a long moment. Emissary, I need to run an experiment. It's going to sound dangerous. Proceed. I need a volunteer from your crew to approach the boundary of this region while wearing full biometric monitoring. Just close enough to confirm our hypothesis. We'll pull them back immediately if there's distress. Zorl felt cold settle into his core. But he was a scientist before he was an emissary. I'll do it myself. Technician Reeve Chu had been working deep space maintenance for 11 years when he first noticed time rot. He explained it to Dr. Tenora. While they prepared the experiment, his voice carrying the practical patience of someone who'd spent years being ignored by people with better degrees. It's not official or anything, Chu said, checking the calibration on Zorl's biomonitor harness. Just something maintenance crews talk about. You work in certain cargo bays or junction corridors and your shift feels wrong. Like you've been working for 9 hours, but the clock says 4. Or the opposite, you finish a job that should have taken all day, and only 20 minutes passed. You reported this? Tenora asked. Sure, every time. Gets logged as instrument error or psychological fatigue. Nobody wants to believe space can be broken in a way that doesn't show up on sensors. Chu sealed the last connection. But I've been in junction corridors where 3 crews rotated through the same 6-hour shift, and we all swore different amounts of time had passed. One guy said 15 minutes, another said 2 days. Clock said 6 hours. We all got paid for 6 hours, so nobody pushed it. Why are you telling me this? Chose looked at her with the kind of tired wisdom that comes from being correct about something nobody wants to hear. Because whatever happened to the Persephone wasn't new, it was just the first time it happened somewhere people couldn't ignore. Emissary Zor approached the boundary in a small observation pod, accompanied by 2 human technicians and Dr. Tenora monitoring remotely. At first nothing changed. Then at precisely 2,847 meters from the Persephone's position, Zorl's biometrics spiked. His heart rate doubled. Neural activity surged into patterns associated with extreme panic. His breathing became rapid, shallow. Emissary, report your status, Tenora called. Zorl's voice came through strained, barely controlled. I see nothing. Empty space. But I feel pressure. Enormous pressure. Like the universe is collapsing into a single point and I'm falling toward it. I can't. How long have I been here? 18 seconds. No, that's not possible. I've been here for minutes, hours. His voice cracked. Pull me back, please. Pull me back. The pod retreated. At 3,000 meters, Sorrel's biometrics began normalizing. By 3,500 meters he was gasping, shaking, but recovering. Dr. Tenora reviewed the data. Sorrel's chronometer had remained synchronized with the ship's clock, but his neural timestamp markers, the way his brain internally tracked elapsed time, had desynchronized catastrophically. His consciousness had experienced approximately 40 subjective minutes during 18 objective seconds, and his cells had aged accordingly. Tenora pulled up the bioscan and felt her stomach drop. Zorl's cellular structures showed degradation consistent with approximately 40 years of aging, concentrated in his neural tissue. He had nearly died of old age in 18 seconds. The 2 human technicians, by contrast, reported feeling heavy and uncomfortable, but their biometrics remained stable. No temporal desync, no accelerated aging. Dr. Tenora opened the comm channel to the Coalition fleet. Emissary Zorl will need immediate medical intervention. He's stable but has experienced severe temporal trauma. As for the experiment's results, she looked at the boundary, invisible to instruments but apparently lethal to most organic consciousness. Humans can survive where you cannot. We don't know why yet, but it's real. The data reached Earth's xenoarchaeology networks within hours, and from there propagated through academic channels to military intelligence, to colonial planning bureaus, to the office of Archon Vrelt of the Hessen Collective. Vrelt was old by any species standards. His people had been navigating interstellar space for 40,000 years, accumulating knowledge, losing knowledge, rediscovering what their ancestors had forgotten. He read Dr. Tenora's report 3 times, then accessed archives that had been sealed for 12,000 years. The warning was still there, written in Old Hessen script, marked with the glyph for existential information preserve but do not act. There are rivers in space that flow with time instead of matter. Most consciousness cannot perceive them as crossable. Entry means cessation, not death, but the perception of death so overwhelming that biology surrenders. We have marked these regions as void and agreed collectively never to speak of them, lest younger species attempt to explore what cannot be explored. But we have observed one species type that seems to perceive these rivers differently. Consciousness that evolved with delayed gratification as a survival mechanism. Species that can neurologically tolerate waiting, that can hold goals across generations, that can perceive suffering as temporary rather than eternal. If such a species ever reaches space, they will walk where we cannot. They will see paths we cannot see. They will open regions we cannot enter. We do not know if this is gift or curse. Vreld closed the file and composed a message to Dr. Tenora. I believe I know what your people have found, and I believe we need to talk before anyone else dies learning about it. Captain Melina Orozco commanded the UNS Vigilant, a deep space patrol vessel that had been quietly repositioned to guard the Persephone site once the Coalition fleet arrived. She trusted her crew, she respected the Coalition, but she had also studied enough history to know what happened when one species discovered they could do something others could not. Either you became a resource to be exploited, or a threat to be eliminated, sometimes both. She watched the Coalition ships maintain careful distance from the Persephone, and she thought about her grandmother. Anya Orozco had been a child aboard the Persephone, 7 years old, listed among the 12,000 missing, presumed dead for 50 years. Melina had been named after her grandmother's sister, who had chosen not to board the colony ship, who had lived a full life on Earth and died 20 years ago, having never known what happened to her family. Now Malena stood on the bridge of a warship, protecting an investigation into the place where her grandmother had vanished. She pulled up the personnel file she wasn't supposed to have, the one her security clearance shouldn't allow, the one she'd pulled anyway using family exception protocols that technically required different circumstances. Anya Orozco, age 7. Medical records, genetic profile, neurological baseline scans from pre-departure screening. Malena compared them to her own. The pattern was there, subtle but present. Enhanced prefrontal cortex development, increased neural plasticity markers, genetic predisposition toward delayed gratification processing. Her grandmother had been able to wait, and Malena apparently had inherited the capacity. She closed the file and made a decision. Helm, take us to 2,800 meters from the Persephone. Slow approach. If I tell you to retreat, you do it immediately. Captain, that's within the boundary region. I know, you'll experience what Emissary Zor experienced. No, Malena said quietly. I don't think I will. At 2,850 meters, Malena felt it. Not pressure, not panic. Weight, like gravity had increased, but only for her perception of time. Every second felt longer, thicker, as if she were trying to think through deep water. Her crew's voices on the comm sounded fast, frantic. But when she checked her chronometer, everything was synchronized. She was experiencing time normally. She just felt like it was slower. Captain, your biometrics are elevated but stable. Dr. Tenora's voice came through. Heart rate up 15%. Neural activity showing enhanced processing load, but no temporal desync. You're adapting. Malena took a slow breath. The weight remained, but it was bearable. Uncomfortable but survivable. I can feel it, she said. But I'm okay. It's like trying to run underwater. Everything takes more effort, but it's not killing me. Captain, I need you to try something. Look toward the exact position where the Persephone is located. Tell me what you see. Malena turned her gaze and stopped breathing. There was a river, not visible exactly, not light or matter, but a flow, a current of something, running through space where her instruments showed vacuum. It looked gray to her perception, like television static given dimension, and in the flow she could see traces, shapes, the faint impression of figures moving, walking. I see it, she whispered. God help me, I see it. There's a river, and there are people in it. Dr. Tenora's voice was very quiet. Captain, can you estimate how many? Malena stared at the flowing gray current, at the shapes moving through it with slow, patient determination. Thousands. Imani Okeo had spent 15 years studying human neurological adaptation to long-duration spaceflight. She understood how brains rewired themselves for years-long voyages, how consciousness adjusted to the absence of planetary circadian rhythms, how psychology evolved in isolation. But she had never seen anything like the data from Captain Orozco's boundary approach. Okeo pulled up the neural scans, comparing them to baseline human readings, to Emissary Zorl's catastrophic desync, to the fragmentary biometric data recovered from the Persephone's final days. The pattern was undeniable. Human brains could process temporal dilation by treating it as extended present rather than accelerated future. Other species' neural architectures interpreted time as a forward flow, the present constantly becoming past, the future constantly arriving. When that flow accelerated beyond survivable rates, consciousness experienced it as approaching the heat death of time itself. Biology surrendered rather than experience eternity compressed into seconds, but human consciousness, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of delayed gratification evolution, waiting for crops, waiting for seasons, waiting for prey, waiting for children to grow, waiting for generational projects to complete, could neurologically perceive accelerated time as simply more present to experience. It was still painful, still exhausting, but survivable. We can wait, Okeo said aloud, staring at the data. That's our gift. We can wait. She transmitted her findings to Dr. Tenora with a single note attached. The colonists walked into the river because their children could see it was safe, and they trusted their children's perception more than their own terror. That's very human. Now we need to decide if we're going to follow them. The Coalition Council chamber aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmonic Accord was designed for species-neutral comfort, which meant it was vaguely uncomfortable for everyone. Archon Vrelt had called the emergency session, and representatives from 7 species attended: Quentari, Hessan, Torvaldi, Kren, humans, and 2 others whose names Tenora still struggled to pronounce correctly. Vrelt opened with the ancient warning his people had preserved. These regions exist, he said. They have always existed. We evolved to avoid them unconsciously because our neural architecture cannot survive them, but humans can. This changes everything. Emissary Zorel, still recovering from his temporal trauma, spoke carefully. It makes humans either invaluable partners or an existential threat. If they can access regions we cannot, they control resources we can never claim, they can hide where we cannot follow, they can colonize areas we marked as void. You're suggesting we should be afraid of them, Captain Orozco said coldly. I'm suggesting fear would be a natural response to discovering you're surrounded by locked doors while another species carries the only keys. Tenora stood. With respect, emissary, we didn't know we had keys until 4 days ago. We're discovering this alongside you, and our people are trapped in that locked room right now. 12,000 colonists walked into a temporal boundary 50 years ago, and according to Captain Orozco's observations, they're still walking, still trying to find a way through. To where? Asked a Torvaldi representative. What lies on the other side of these rivers? We don't know, Tenora admitted, but we need to find out, and that means sending people in. The chamber fell silent. Then a Kren delegate spoke, their translated voice carrying harmonic overtones that suggested deep concern. You're proposing a rescue mission into a region where time flows at a ratio of what? 1,000 to 1, 10,000 to 1. We don't know the ratio yet, Dr. Okio interjected. But based on Captain Orozco's observations and the biometric data from the Persephone, we estimate somewhere between 1,800 and 1,200. 1 hour outside equals 30 to 50 subjective days inside. Then a 6-hour mission would mean. The Kren delegate's translator struggled. Months, years, subjective decades for the crew. Yes, you're asking humans to sacrifice years of their lives to retrieve colonists who may already be dead. Captain Orozco's voice cut through the chamber. My grandmother is in that river. She's been walking for 50 objective years, which means she's experienced roughly 50,000 subjective years if the ratio held constant. She's either dead, or she's become something we can't imagine. Either way, I'm going in. The only question is whether the Coalition supports the mission, or tries to stop it. Vrelt's ancient eyes studied her. And if we tried to stop you, then you'd learn that humans are very patient, but not infinitely so. Earth's government debated for 3 days before authorizing the Navigator initiative. The mission parameters were straightforward. Send a small crew into the slow layer, map its extent, locate the Persephone colonists, establish a beacon, and return. Estimated mission time outside the boundary, 6 hours. Estimated subjective time for the crew, 200 to 300 years. Volunteers only. Applications numbered 40,000 within the first 12 hours. Tenora sat in the selection committee room, reviewing psychological profiles, neurological scans, family situations. They needed people who could endure subjective centuries, people who understood the cost, people who could hold on to purpose across lifetimes compressed into hours. We're asking them to become something inhuman, one committee member said quietly. No, Tenora replied. We're asking them to become more human, to take the thing we're best at, waiting, enduring, holding hope across time, and push it further than it's ever been pushed. She selected 12 crew members. Captain Orozco was first on the list. The Navigator-class vessel Patience was purpose-built for the mission. Minimal crew, maximum life support, full stasis capability if needed, and enough cultural archives to keep 12 people sane for 3 subjective centuries. Captain Orozco stood in the launch bay, suited and ready, surrounded by the 11 others who had chosen to sacrifice years for hours. Dr. Tenora addressed them through the comment, "You understand what you're agreeing to. Outside we'll experience 6 hours. Inside you'll live through centuries. You'll age, you'll change. When you come back, everyone you know will have waited hours while you waited lifetimes." "We understand," Orozco replied, "but our people are still in there, still walking. They've been waiting for us for 50,000 subjective years. We can wait 300. The Patience launched. It approached the boundary at 2,500 meters from the Persephone's position. Then it crossed. Outside perspective, hour 1. The Coalition fleet watched the Patience enter the slow layer. On external cameras, the ship simply stopped. Not violently, not with any visible effect. It just became perfectly still, as if the universe had paused it mid-flight. Telemetry continued transmitting, but at a crawl. Each data packet took minutes to arrive. Timestamps showed the Patience's internal chronometers running at impossible speeds. Emissary Zoral watched the frozen ship and felt something he rarely experienced: awe. "They're living centuries in there right now," he said quietly, "while we watch." Dr. Tenora nodded, monitoring the slow stream of data. First transmission confirms entry. Crew is conscious. Experiencing temporal weight but stable. Captain Orozco reports seeing the river clearly now. They're following the colonists' trail. What do you think they'll find? I don't know. But I think we're about to learn something about humanity that even we didn't know. Inside perspective, subjective years 150. Captain Malena Orozco experienced the first decade as a long, grinding pressure. Time moved normally from her perspective. Seconds passed as seconds, days as days. But the weight never lifted. Every thought required effort. Every movement felt like pushing through resistance. The crew adapted. They established routines not to pass time, but to maintain sanity across its enormity. They read. They learned new skills. They talked, sharing stories from lives that now seemed impossibly distant. By subjective year 20, Orozco had mastered 3 languages and written a book about temporal psychology. By year 30, she had forgotten what her daughter's voice sounded like. By year 40, she had accepted that the person who returned would not be the person who entered. And through it all, they followed the trail. The river was visible to all of them now, a flowing current of gray through black space, and in it, gradually becoming clearer, the figures of the Persephone colonists, walking, still walking after 50,000 subjective years. In subjective year 47, the patients caught up to them. The colonists had changed. Not physically, temporal dilation had preserved their bodies in a state of extreme slow aging, but psychologically, they had become something else. They moved in perfect synchronization, thousands of people flowing through the gray current like a single organism. They no longer communicated with words. Their consciousness had merged into a collective patience, a shared endurance that had survived 50 millennia. Captain Orozco hailed them. The response came not as language but as understanding, a direct neural impression that bypassed speech entirely. You came. We knew you would. We've been waiting. How? Orozco asked. How did you survive this long? We learned to be time instead of experiencing it. We stopped fighting the weight. We became part of the river. We're here to bring you home. Home is behind us. Ahead is where the river goes. Orozco felt her heart sink. You don't want to come back. We've walked for 50,000 years to reach the other side. We can see it now. Just a little further. Will you walk with us? The decision point. Turn back now with coordinates and data, having spent 50 subjective years inside, or continue forward with the colonists, spending another 250 years to see where the river led. Orozco looked at her crew, aged now, weary, but still human, still capable of choosing to wait longer. Let's see where this goes, she said. They walked. Outside perspective, hours 4-6. The Coalition fleet received periodic data bursts from the patients. Hour 4, crew has made contact with colonists. Continuing mission. Hour 5, approaching boundary terminus. Estimates suggest exit point in 1 subjective century. Hour 6, we've crossed. Tell humanity we found what's on the other side. Then nothing. Dr. Tenora stared at the frozen ship, still locked in the slow layer, now deeper than any human had gone before. They're not coming back, are they? Someone whispered. They're coming back, Tenora said, but not the people who left. No one could experience 300 years and remain unchanged. At hour 6 and 14 minutes, the patients emerged. The ship that crossed back through the boundary was the same vessel that had entered, same hull, same registry codes, but the crew, Captain Orozco, appeared on the communication channel. She looked older, not physically. The temporal effects had been medically managed, but in her eyes, in the weight of her presence. Navigator mission successful, she reported. We've mapped the slow layer, we've found the colonists, and we've discovered what's on the other side. What did you find? Dr. Tenora asked. Orozco smiled. It was the smile of someone who had lived 3 centuries and learned things that couldn't be taught in 1 lifetime. 18% of the galaxy that you've been marking as void. It's not empty, it's full. Full of space that only humans can cross. Full of worlds that exist in folded time, and the colonists. She paused. They walked for 50,000 years and found a planet. They're colonizing it now, in a time layer where they'll live for millions of subjective years while decades pass outside. They asked me to tell Earth they're fine. They're home, just not the home they expected. The Coalition Council chamber was silent. Then Archon Vrelt spoke. You're saying humans can colonize regions of space that exist in different time flows. Regions where you'll live subjectively longer than the rest of us can comprehend. Yes, that makes you the most powerful species in the Coalition. No, Orozco corrected gently. It makes us the most patient. There's a difference. What Orozco corrected gently. It makes us the most patient. There's a difference. What Orozco corrected gently. It makes us the most patient. There's a difference. What Orozco corrected gently. It makes us the most patient. What Orozco corrected gently. What Orozco corrected gently. It makes us the most patient. There's a difference. What Orozco corrected gently. Regions where you'll live subjectively longer than the rest of us can comprehend. Yes, that makes you the most powerful species in the Coalition. No, Orozco corrected gently. It makes us the most patient. There's a difference. What Orozco corrected gently. What Orozco corrected gently. It makes us the most. The Coalition formally requested human assistance. There were 17 mapped slow-layer regions within colonized space. All had been avoided for millennia. All represented unclaimed territory. Entire sections of the galaxy rendered accessible only through human navigation. plan. The proposal was simple. Humans would train navigator crews to guide coalition ships through slow-layer space, opening new regions for colonization and trade. The price: humans would bear the temporal cost. They would age centuries while guiding others through hours. They would live entire lives in subjective time while the rest of the galaxy experienced days. Earth's government debated for weeks. Some called it exploitation, asking humans to sacrifice time itself for others' benefit. Others called it opportunity, becoming indispensable to galactic expansion. Captain Orozco, now formally titled Navigator Captain and recognized as the first human to cross a slow layer, testified before the United Nations Assembly. "I lived 287 subjective years inside the boundary," she said. "I learned 17 new languages, I wrote 4 books, I mastered skills I never had time for in my first life. I met my grandmother who had lived 50,000 subjective years and become someone I couldn't comprehend. I saw worlds that exist in time-space no other species can reach." She paused. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I would do it again, because patience is our gift. The ability to wait, to endure time, to hold purpose across centuries, that's what makes us human. The galaxy needs people who can do that, and right now we're the only ones." The vote passed. The Navigator Corps was established. Volunteers enrolled by the thousands. 1 year later, Dr. Kivas Tenora stood at the memorial wall on Unity Station, where the names of the Persephone colonists were inscribed. They weren't dead. They were thriving. In fact, on a world experiencing time at a 1:10,000 ratio, they would build a civilization that would subjectively last millions of years, while the outside galaxy aged centuries. But they were gone in every way that mattered to the people who had known them. Tenora touched her grandmother's name on the wall. She had been aboard the Persephone too, a child, like Orozco's grandmother. Now she was incomprehensibly old, living in a time flow Tenora could never enter, building something Tenora would never see. "Do you regret it?" Emissary Zorel asked quietly. He had come to pay respects as well, though his species didn't fully understand the concept. "Regret what? Finding the slow layers, opening them, knowing your people will sacrifice their time for ours." Tenora thought about it. About Captain Orozco, aged by centuries but undeniably alive. About the navigator crews being trained to guide others through regions of space that existed in different time. About humanity's strange gift, its burden, its purpose. "No," she said finally, "because now I understand what we are. We're not the strongest species or the smartest or the most advanced. We're the ones who can wait. We're the ones who can carry time on our backs and keep walking. The galaxy needs that. And it turns out we've always been doing it. Waiting for crops, waiting for children, waiting for change. We've just learned to wait on a bigger scale." Zorel's translator hummed with something that might have been respect. "Your daughter enlisted in the Navigator Corps. I know. She'll age centuries while you age years. I know. How do you bear it?" Tenora smiled, sad but genuine. "The same way every parent bears it. You watch your children go places you can't follow, and you trust that you raised them strong enough to survive what you can't imagine. Human parents have been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years. This is just further." They stood together in silence, two species learning to understand each other across the unbridgeable gap of their different relationships with time. While 43 navigator missions had successfully crossed slow-layer boundaries, mapping routes, establishing beacons, guiding coalition ships through regions that had been impassable for millennia, the galaxy was opening. 18% more space had become accessible. New colonies were being founded, new trade routes established, and humanity had become what Dr. Tenora had predicted. Not conquerors, not protectors, but navigators, the patient ones, the guides through time. Captain Malena Orozco, now aged 34 years objectively but 287 subjectively, trained the 5th class of navigator candidates. They were younger than her in every way that mattered. Their bodies were younger, their memories spanned fewer years, but they understood the weight of what they were volunteering for. "You'll live entire lifetimes between launch and return," Orozco told them. "You'll forget faces you love. You'll outlive versions of yourself. You'll become someone different while everyone else stays the same. And when you come back, the galaxy will have moved forward hours while you moved forward centuries." A young navigator raised her hand. "Why would we choose that?" Orozco smiled. "Because someone has to. Because the galaxy needs people who can carry time on their backs. Because patience is our gift, and gifts are meant to be shared." She paused, remembering her own crossing. Remembering the wait, the endurance, the slow transformation from the person who entered to the person who emerged. "And because," she said quietly, "there are things worth waiting for. Truths you can only learn by living through time, most people will never experience. You'll come back changed. But you'll come back knowing something that no one else can know. What it means to be truly patient. What it means to endure not days or years, but centuries, and still choose to hope." The candidates were silent. Then, one by one, they nodded. They understood. They were human after all. Waiting was what they did. 10 years after first contact, Dr. Kivas Tenora published her final paper on the slow layer phenomenon. It was titled simply, Patience as Navigation, Humanity's Temporal Gift. The abstract read, "We have discovered that consciousness itself can be a key to regions of space previously thought uninhabitable. Human neural architecture, evolved through millennia of delayed gratification and multi-generational planning, allows us to perceive and survive temporal dilation that proves lethal to other known species. This discovery has implications beyond exploration. It suggests that cognitive evolution shapes not just how we think, but what regions of reality we can access. We are not stronger than other species. We are not more advanced, but we can wait. And in a universe where time flows differently in different places, the ability to wait is the ability to navigate everywhere." The paper became required reading for every xenopsychology program in coalition space, and in the slow layers, human navigators continued their work, walking through rivers of time, living centuries to guide others through hours, aging while the galaxy aged slower, patient, enduring, human, one very. 50 years later, the old woman who had once been Dr. Kivas Tenora sat in her garden on Unity Station and watched the ships come and go. Navigator vessels, departing for slow layer crossings, coalition ships, now routinely traveling through regions that had been void for millions of years. Her daughter had been a navigator, had crossed 17 times, had lived 4,000 subjective years while aging 60 objectively, had become someone Tenora could no longer fully understand, someone who spoke of time like others spoke of weather, but she was alive, still guiding, still patient. Tenora's great-granddaughter was training to be a navigator too. 3 generations of her family, learning to carry time. Emissary Zoral, impossibly old now for his species, came to visit. "I still don't understand it," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "How you bear it, watching your children disappear into centuries." Tenora smiled. "Every parent watches their children disappear into time they won't experience. We just see it more clearly. Do you think it was worth it? The discovery, the cost?" She thought about the Persephone, about Captain Orozco, about the 40,000 humans who had volunteered to become navigators, about the colonists who had walked 50,000 years and built something incomprehensible on the other side. "We learned something important," she said finally, "about what we are, what we've always been. We're the species that can wait, that can hope across generations, that can look at a journey lasting lifetimes and say, yes, we'll walk that. The galaxy needed that. Turns out it needed it desperately. And the price is time. But time is the only currency we were ever really spending anyway. Now we just spend it more deliberately." Zoral was quiet for a moment. Then, "My people are beginning to study human neural architecture, trying to understand how you do it. Some think we might be able to adapt. Can you? We don't know, but we're learning to be patient. You're teaching us." Tenora laughed softly. "That's the real gift, isn't it? Not that we can cross the slow layers, but that we can teach patience to a galaxy that forgot how to wait." They sat together, watching navigator ships depart, each one carrying crews who would live centuries in days. Each one demonstrating humanity's strange, essential gift, patience, the ability to wait, the willingness to bear time. 100 years after first contact, the memorial service for the first navigator generation was attended by representatives from 47 species. Captain Milena Orozco had died at age 134, having lived 287 subjective years inside slow layers and another 134 outside. She had guided 18 coalition expeditions through temporal boundaries, had trained 4,000 navigators, had changed the shape of galactic civilization. Her daughter, navigator Captain Elena Orozco, delivered the eulogy. "My mother used to say that patience was humanity's gift to the galaxy, but I think it's more than that. Patience is humanity's gift to ourselves. The ability to wait, to endure, to hope across time. That's what makes us who we are." My mother lived that truth more completely than most people can imagine. She walked through centuries so others could walk through hours. She aged while the galaxy stayed young, and she never regretted it. Elena paused, looking out at the assembled species. There are 17 human colonies now in slow layer regions, places where people live subjectively millions of years while decades pass outside. They're building civilizations we'll never fully understand, living timescales we can't comprehend. But they're still human, still patient, still waiting for the rest of us to catch up. She smiled, sad and proud. That's who we are. That's what we do. We wait. We endure. We carry time on our backs so others don't have to. And we do it because someone has to. And we're the ones who can. The memorial ended. The galaxy remembered. And humanity continued its work. Navigating, guiding, patient. Deep in a slow layer region marked as Sector Patient 7, a colony ship emerged from a temporal crossing that had lasted 6 objective hours and 12,000 subjective years. The colonists aboard, human with representatives from 3 other species who had learned to tolerate short, slow layer exposures, had built an entire civilization inside the ship during the crossing. They had lived, loved, died, and been reborn across 400 generations. They had developed new philosophies, new arts, new understandings of what consciousness could endure, and now they emerged into normal space, ready to colonize a world that would exist in yet another time layer. The colony leader, descendant of descendants of the original crew, transmitted a message back to Coalition space. This is Colony Patient 7. We have crossed. We have endured. We are ready to build. Thank you for teaching us to wait. Thank you for showing us that time is not something to fear, but something to carry. We are human, we are patient, and we are home. The message took 3 weeks to reach Unity Station. By then, Colony Patient 7 had already established its first settlement in a time layer where they would experience 50,000 years, while the outside galaxy aged a century. They would build something vast, something incomprehensible, something only possible for those who could wait. Dr. Keves Tenora never lived to see that message, but her great-great-granddaughter did. She stood in the same garden where Tenora had once sat with emissary Zoral, and she read the transmission with tears in her eyes. They did it, she whispered. They learned to wait. Beside her, an alien colleague, Quentari, 5th generation post-contact, nodded slowly. Your species gave us a gift we didn't know we needed, they said. You showed us that strength isn't just power or speed or intelligence. Sometimes it's the ability to endure, to wait, to hold hope across time. And you're learning. We're trying. It doesn't come naturally to us, but we're trying. They stood together, 2 species learning to share time, and watched the next navigator ship prepare for departure. Inside were crew members who would live 300 subjective years in the next 6 hours, who would age while their families stayed young, who would carry time on their backs so others could cross where they could not, patient, enduring, and teaching the galaxy, one slow crossing at a time, what it meant to wait. Runtalish Tidin's stories like this remind us that humanity's greatest strength isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's the quiet ability to endure what others cannot, to wait when waiting seems impossible, to hope across timescales that would break lesser resolve. If you appreciated this exploration of patience as power, consider subscribing. There are more stories waiting about the strange gifts consciousness brings to the universe, about the ways we survive what seems unsurvivable, about the quiet strength that defines us. What other human traits might become superpowers in a wider galaxy? What would you sacrifice to guide others through impossible spaces? The slow layers are calling, and humanity is still learning to navigate them.